the Conservative government that has put us into deficit right now, and it was the Liberal government under Trudeau that first put in the deficit into this country. We had very little to no deficit in this country and debt. And then Trudeau decided to put this country into deficit and debt under the Liberal Party. Now, in this current economic state, we had a recession. And so Canada had a choice to make. You needed to choose not to spend any money, not go into debt, or need to choose to put into money into local businesses and to stimulate the economy. So Canada chose to stimulate the economy now. Now, once revenues are increasing, those revenues should be put back into the government coffers so that we equalize things and we have a balanced budget. Now, under the Conservatives, before we had this recession, what happened is that we had surplus dollars. But they refused to save those surplus dollars. They instead spent those surplus dollars. So when we had a recession, they didn't have those surplus dollars to begin with, those emergency dollars to begin with, to save them so that they wouldn't be in deficit, right? So that's one of the reasons why we had such a problem. Number two, in order to address a lot of the economic problems in this country, a lot of the fiscal issues, we need open books from this government. We need to see exactly what this government is doing. And this government has shown contempt for Parliament and has refused to divulge many of the important financial details of this country. So I say New Democrats want to work towards a better nation where we fund all these important things. I also want to say that in order to balance the budget, it's important to reverse the corporate tax cut that the Conservatives have put in year after year. And may I say that the Liberal government also put in corporate tax cuts at various points. This is a real concern of mine. We need to put money not into the corporations, but into services for regular citizens, making effective and efficient health care delivery. Thank you.
Okay, it's your turn, Karen.
Need I remind you that it was the Chrétien government with Paul Martin as finance minister and Paul Martin's government that left our country with a $13.2 billion surplus and a $3 billion contingency fund, which the Conservatives completely squandered. I would also like to remind the Conservatives in particular that they're wanting to take credit now for the fact that the banks held strong when Harper himself was the one trying to convince Chrétien and Martin that the banks should be deregulated. Thank goodness the Liberals stood tough, and that's what's helped us weather the recession. You speak about smaller government. We were promised by the Harper government that there would be smaller government. It is now the largest government that we have ever had in history, and the largest deficit that we've ever had in history. Yes, the Liberals gave corporate tax cuts at a time of surplus and without a deficit. They're not a bad thing in and of themselves. This is not the time in a deficit and with such huge financial problems to be giving the corporate tax cuts to the fattest corporations that are already at the lowest tax rate they are, and even lower than what they are in the United States. So we want to use the $6 billion of those corporate tax cuts that the Harper government would give to go towards seniors, pensions, education, health care, not squandering it with their fat cat cronies in the corporations when there is absolutely no evidence that that increases jobs. And so the Liberals have a strong fiscal policy with accountability and transparency.
Let's move on to the 5 minutes for debate.
We've been speaking of corporate tax cuts and how this is important. How this is an important issue for Canadian society, in that we have these billions and billions of dollars that are given to corporations rather than for social services. And this direction of the government, it just reflects how much they're in favor of corporations and the wealthy, and not that of regular citizens. I take, for instance, Mr. Kent, our opponent who's not here, his record as Minister, as MP, as Minister of State for the Americas, a position that he held for his first 2 years in office. Mr. Kent was in favor of the corporations doing their business in various countries in South America without respect for human rights, without respect for human freedoms, and without ensuring labor rights and union rights and rights for workers to have good jobs, well-paying jobs, and be treated well and in physically good environments. Mr. Kent instead led free rein for the Canadian corporations to enter South America. This was the main concern of mine. That is in favoring corporations, and that's why we have these corporate tax cuts, to favor the corporations. And I was particularly concerned with when Peter Kent, our MP in Thornhill, concluded a trade deal with Colombia, a corrupt regime, a regime that does not respect the human rights of many of its citizens, does not allow freedoms, assassinates union leaders, etc. And Peter Kent decided to make a deal with them. We say no to the favoring of the corporations. We say remove the corporate tax cut and put it to the citizens so that you can pay for things like more doctors and more nurses, better national health home care program, so that seniors and others that are living at their home can have services come to their home to clean their home and to help them, rather than wait for 2 years or more, which is the present system right now.
Mr. Simon, if you have a choice, are you going to eliminate the deficit first, or you're going to put the money into the social funds like you talk about for the seniors or for community services? Which one are you going to do first?
The NDP,
what can you do to eliminate the deficit? You haven't answered my question.
The NDP, sorry, pardon the interruption. The NDP is for a balanced budget. The NDP under Tommy Douglas, its first leader, made sure a balanced budget happened in Saskatchewan every year. We are for ensuring that services are paid for by the government without incurring debt. And I do not believe that you have to choose between going into debt and between social services. You can choose to reverse the corporate tax cut, make sure your budget is balanced, and ensure that services are paid for, and more services. That's what we say.
Karen, what do you think?
Well, I think you've left out the other part of the question, which was, would we see reduce in the size of government? And absolutely. Mr. Harper has had spending going absolutely out of control. They spend more money on advertisements and all of the consultants and communications departments, and the size of the Prime Minister's office is bigger than it's ever been. So absolutely, one would have to reduce the size of that ridiculous, wasteful spending. And of course, I concur with my colleague at the same time as rolling back this promised tax break for the biggest corporations without raising taxes and without undermining the social services. You don't pit one against the other. You don't say either this or that. We can do both. We've shown that we've done it before and held tough, maintained the social services, negotiated the health accord, which, by the way, the Harper government hasn't put one dime of new money into, although the smoke and mirrors and the numbers they try to tell you that don't add up. And so we will continue to show that level of fiscal responsibility, accountability, and transparency.
I find a lot of this,
because we have
I find a lot of this
record.
hypocritical, because it was under Michael Ignatieff 2 years ago where the Conservative government agreed to go into deficit. They made a deal with the Conservative government. This liberals here have not been opposing this government for 2 years. They did not choose to go into Parliament. They refused to take a vote because they supported the Conservatives putting this government into debt and deficit. The NDP was opposed to this government. This Liberal Party made a deal with Ignatieff and Harper in early 2009, ensuring that their government would survive if they put the government into deficit. I find this hypocritical that they are criticizing that the Canadian government is in deficit right now and spending so much right now when they are responsible.
You don't have time to fight back. Let's move on to the fourth question.